So hello, everybody. Um, let's begin. I'm so excited for this event and really grateful that you're all here. So some of us might be unfamiliar with the Weizmann Institute of Science. It is located in Rehovot, and it is really uh, the jewel in the crown for Israel, forging the way for over 70 years as a small but mighty global scientific leader. So the Weizmann Institute was initially established in 1934 by Israel and Rebecca Seif, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, in memory of their son Daniel. And then 15 years later, in 1949, it was renamed for Dr. Chaim Weizmann, the first president of the state of Israel and the founder of the Institute. And since that time, the Weizmann scientists have secured several of the world's top scientific achievements, including Nobel laureates and the Turing Prizes. And most recently, the Institute was ranked number 8 in the world in the prestigious Leiden University ranking for research quality, the only organization outside of the US to rank in the top 8 among the likes of Harvard and Princeton and MIT. And that is why, when we were looking at who we were going to bring in for this contemporary Israel speaker series, which we are launching right now, that Weizmann was a natural choice to explore contemporary Israel through this scientific lens. And so we are incredibly pleased to have Professor Roei Ozeri with us. He is not only a quantum physicist, but also a part of the new leadership at the Weizmann Institute, serving as the Vice President for Resource Development and Public Affairs. If you are like me, you might, yes, showing here. If you're like me, you may be wondering what exactly is a day in the life of a scientist. What does this look like? Essentially, we're asking the question, what does it take to make scientific discoveries that benefit all of humanity? And particularly over the last 16 months or so, as we have been exposed to science more than any other period of our lifetimes. So before we welcome Professor Ozeri, we are going to begin with a short video that demonstrates what 24 hours on the Weizmann Institute of Science, the campus, actually looks and feels like. So I'm going to share my screen with you now. We'll take a quick look at this video.
Rabbi, just make sure there's some, I don't know if there's anybody that still needs to be let in. I've had a couple of messages.
Yes, I have everyone coming in now. I had
Great.
For a moment, I looked away. So thank you. I will keep my eye on it. I'm going to also just ask that everyone please remain muted for the entirety of this video. Let's see, share screen. What happened? Just a moment, we're getting there. Disappeared on.
For me, one of the amazing things about the Weizmann Institute is that it promotes creativity on multiple levels. First of all, just coming into this institute, everything around you is beautiful and well kept, and the whole idea is to enable a state of mind that's relaxed and creative and can really think about how to do science in ways that are different than the way science is done in other places in the world.
It's a very dynamic community. with unprecedented, I think, exchange of ideas between people that are coming from very different fields.
One of the great things doing stem cell research as the Weizmann is that we have collaborations and access to facilities and knowledge that is very vast and much needed for us to do our experiments and get very deep answers.
Progress in science always came from understanding. Once we understand how the disease works, then we can find ways to better treat it.
I can't think of many other places where a computer scientist can very freely talk to a biologist without any boundaries.
This place is very unique. It has a special combination of both state-of-the-art experimental facilities together with a unique atmosphere. And this combination enables me to ask very fundamental questions, which are really curiosity-driven about physics, and then try to search for an answer in my own lab.
When you ask what makes the Weizmann Institute a great institution, I think everyone understands it is all about people. Just watch this group of people and try to realize what they went through, how much passion, curiosity, intelligence, dedication to their work it required to achieve what they have achieved.
The Weizmann Institute is one big family, a family of students, a family of scientists, and a family of supporters.
The Institute is far above all the other institutions in Israel in capabilities of research. So if you are interested in achieving novel research, this is the place.
And I love talking to my colleagues, to other scientists, and hear about their ideas, their findings, and especially if we can find solutions, if we can break through walls and find avenues to make things happen. And that's the fun part about the Institute, the freedom to think and imagine and dream and make dreams happen.
Incredible. So thank you so much. Just as we move forward into the rest of our program, I want to introduce Shira Lester, the Development Director of Weizmann Canada. And Shira, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for organizing all this, and what fabulous attendance. I have to thank Francie Klein, who is a member of Holy Blossom Temple and a board member of ours, and our Toronto chapter president, and a member of the international board, who was the connector and who was really instrumental in making this happen. So thank you so much, Francie. I would also like to introduce Susan Stern, our CEO. We have a host of Weizmann Canada attendees, and we have Niva from Israel, and we have Rachel from Israel as well. So I will introduce them at the end so that you can know exactly who helped make this all happen. But right now, let's dive into the program. Before I introduce Professor Ozeri, I'll just let you know that if you want to have some questions asked at the end of the talk during the Q&A, or if you have some burning question that needs to be answered while Professor Ozeri is speaking, please message in the chat, and I'm going to be monitoring that, and I'll share those questions as we proceed. So thank you again for Professor Ozeri for being here. Thank you all for being here. Professor Ozeri was born in Israel and earned degrees from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and the Weizmann Institute of Science before conducting his postdoc research at the National Institute of Standards and Technology in Boulder, Colorado, in the group of David Weizmann, the 2012 Physics Nobel laureate. Roi's distinguished career in quantum computing includes many research awards, as well as articles published in prestigious journals such as Nature, Science and Physical Review, and Nature, Science and Physical Review Letters. He joined the Weizmann Institute faculty in 2007, and he was appointed Vice President of Resource Development in December of 2019. Roi also has ties to Toronto in the food business. I believe it's your cousins who are the Ozeri brothers, famous for their Ozeri Bakery, as it's called in Toronto, and Parallel Restaurant, where I happened to have dinner on Saturday night. It was very delicious. And so now it is my privilege to introduce you to Professor Roi Ozeri to tell us all about what is wonderful about Weizmann.
Thank you very much, Shira. And thanks all. It's a privilege to be with you with the Holy Blossom congregation. I do have a warm corner in my heart for Toronto, and I spent many summers in Toronto, even as a youth instructor at a summer camp not far away. So I'm very familiar with beautiful Canada. So yeah, let me start by sharing my screen. And I'll give a brief. Do you see my screen?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Great. So it's a pleasure to give a short introduction of the Weizmann Institute of Science, where science is really driven by curiosity. And what I mean by that is that, if you notice, it's not application-driven science. It's not a specific science which we focus on. It's curiosity-driven science, which really means that we believe in people, and we believe in curious people, and we believe in people that would give ideas that would drive science forward. So Weizmann Institute was indeed established by Dr. Chaim Weizmann, who was not just a chemist, but also a statesman, and a visionary who led the birth of the state of Israel. And this is a quote by Chaim Weizmann, who said, "I trust and feel sure in my heart that science will bring to this land both peace and a renewal of its youth, creating here a springs of a new spiritual and material life." Chaim Weizmann was a politician, and one of his political rivals actually was David Ben-Gurion. Actually, Chaim Weizmann lost the race with David Ben-Gurion politically. And I think they had very different yet complementary views of the way the state of Israel should be. While David Ben-Gurion saw Israel as a more agricultural, proletarian land and country, Chaim Weizmann saw science as a means to establish the Israeli economy and also as a means to create relationship with our neighbors. And I think that today, more than 70 years down the road, if you look at the way the Israeli economy works, you can actually appreciate the vision that Chaim Weizmann has and appreciate the role that science has in the high-tech industry of Israel today. And a few weeks ago, we traveled to the Emirates, to Abu Dhabi, to sign a collaboration agreement with the university in Abu Dhabi on artificial intelligence, and you could literally feel the value that science has as a bridge between Israel and its neighbors. So I think that this vision of Chaim Weizmann was truly visionary. Weizmann Institute of Science is one of the world's top-ranked centers of basic research, dedicating to increasing knowledge in the natural and exact sciences. In short, we're a research institute that focuses on basic research. We don't have engineering faculties. We don't have medical schools. If you look at the tree of knowledge, the science that is done at the Weizmann Institute of Science is about the roots of the tree, the very basic concepts and ideas, the very fundamental ideas that are at the basis of the way nature works. So Rabbi Goodman already mentioned this, but the Weizmann Institute of Science was established 87 years ago as the Ziff Institute. The Ziff family or still is the owners of Marks and Spencer in London. And back then it was a small chemistry laboratory. You can actually see the original Ziff building here. In 1949, in honor of Chaim Weizmann's 75th birthday, it was expanded to cover all of the natural and exact sciences and became the Weizmann Institute of Science. A little bit by numbers, we're a relatively small institution, about 286 research group as of today. The Weizmann Institute of Science has grew since 1934, when there was basically a single research group, that of Chaim Weizmann himself, all the way to the mid-1970s. But for the last almost 50 years, the Weizmann Institute hasn't changed in size at all. And it's a little bit surprising because we don't limit the number of scientists on campus at all. In fact, our faculties are free to hire new talent, new staff members, and start new research groups at will. We, the management, once a faculty wants to hire a new scientist and establish a new research group, we would fund that. So there's no limit to the number of scientists and research groups on campus. Yet the number of research groups hasn't changed, and that is really the result of us accepting and admitting as new faculty members really the top applications that we get. We have 5 faculties. 2 of them are in the life sciences: biochemistry, biology, then chemistry, physical sciences, mathematics, and computer science. We'll go over the Feinberg Graduate School, but over 1,600 graduate students, and then almost 10,000 alumni, master alumni of our graduate school in Israel. In fact, Weizmann Institute of Science is responsible for the education of about 25% of the scientific PhDs in Israel. Again, we're a fairly small research institute. If you compare the number of scientific groups we have to the larger universities in North America and Europe, we're probably about quarter, if not less, than a typical university. Small as we are, I think the research at the Weizmann Institute is at a very high level. If you compare the Weizmann Institute to other research institutions and universities in the world, and there are various ways to rank institutions and universities, you see that if you look at rankings that look at the quality of research output, we rank relatively high. So, for example, one such ranking, the Leiden ranking, looks at the number of research papers that come out of research groups at a given institution that are at the top 10% of their field, and that's measured by the number of times these papers are being cited. Weizmann Institute has been ranked at the top 10 consistently for the past 5-6 years. In 2020, we've been ranked number 8. Same is true for Nature Index. We're ranked number 2 in 2019. And it's a non-trivial task to be ranked as high, coming from a relatively small country. Another figure of merit you can judge an institution is the number of prestigious prizes that go to scientists. We have 1 Nobel laureate among the faculty at the Weizmann Institute of Science, and 3 Nobel laureates, actually all of them in chemistry, that received the Nobel Prize for research that was done at the Weizmann Institute of Science. We also have 3 Turing Awards on campus, 35 Wolf Prizes. Wolf Prize is probably the best predictor for a Nobel Prize, as well as 37 Israel Prizes. The Israel Prize is the highest prize given to research, to scientists in Israel. So although small, or maybe because we're small, I think that one of the most important things for us are collaborations with international leading institutions and universities, and that's why we work very hard. Our scientists naturally collaborate with their colleagues around the world, but as an institution, we try to support these collaborations as much as we can, and that's why through the years we've established collaboration programs with leading institutions in the world, both in North America and the US as elsewhere. I mentioned the collaboration we have with MBZU AI, which is an artificial intelligence university in Abu Dhabi. Actually, the Caltech collaboration that we have is sponsored by prestigious members of your congregation, by Jerry Schwartz and Heather Weizmann, and that's one of our most successful collaboration programs that we have. I think that science today is done globally. It's done through collaboration, and I think these collaboration programs are tremendously important for us. I mentioned that we're a research institution and not a university, yet we do have a graduate school. The Feinberg Graduate School produces about 300 graduates a year, a total of about 1,200 MSc and PhD students, and a few hundred postdoctoral fellows. And as I mentioned, we're responsible to about 25% of the scientific PhDs in Israel. In order to be an international graduate school, and again, we rely on the pool of talent that Israel produces, and while Israeli students are good, and we are able to find many excellent graduate students in Israel, in order to become relevant, remain relevant, and in order to be able to compete with the top institutions in the world, we have to be able to attract international students. And that's why all of the studies in the Feinberg Graduate School are done in English. We have a full scholarship and stipend program, which means that graduate students at the Weizmann Institute not only don't pay tuition, but they also get full living scholarships that support their living expenses in Israel, which, as you know, is not a cheap country to live in. And that's how we're able to attract students from all over the world. We have students from 42 different countries at the Feinberg Graduate School. So we focus on education, scientific education at the Weizmann Institute by educating graduate students, but we understand that focusing on educating graduate students at the Weizmann Institute is not sufficient, and we need to have an impact of education in Israel and beyond Israel. And we understand that it's our responsibility and mission as scientists to perform outreach and to make the scientific content of our research accessible to children beyond the walls of the Weizmann Institute of Science. And that's why we also engage in scientific education and literacy from elementary schools all the way to high schools, from periphery in Israel all the way to excellence programs that engage excellent students. So people who come from programs in schools for excellent kids and attract them to the Weizmann Institute of Science to perform academic research already during their high school years. We do that through several arms. One of them is a Department of Science Teaching, which actually develops teaching programs for Israeli high schools. Through the Davidson Institute of Science Education, which is the outreach arm of the Weizmann Institute of Science. The Davidson Institute runs more than 70 programs for both for students as well as teachers. We have several 100,000 students and teachers that go through the Weizmann Institute of Science every year. Actually, the impact of the Davidson Institute is much larger than the physical presence of students on campus at the 21st century, and that's something that COVID pandemic, unfortunately, taught us very well. The outreach of education can be very efficiently done through digital means, the way we communicate now. And that's why the Davidson Institute, through the iScience program, is focusing very heavily on creating outreach and education through digital platforms to all of Israel and beyond Israel. In fact, some of these programs are done in Arabic and reach our neighboring countries. And we can actually measure that by participation, digital participation through countries like Iraq, Syria, Jordan, and Egypt. One very important example of scientific outreach that we coordinate at the Weizmann Institute of Science again shows the Canadian impact we have on our activity, and that is done in the Schwartz-Reisman Science Education Centers. It's actually a chain of centers which has taken physics matriculation education, and Weizmann Institute has taken responsibility on this physics education. And now we have 3 active centers and 3 more in the making all over Israel. These centers are really transforming physics education at the high school level in Israel. And I have the pleasure and privilege of actually being involved in this network of physics education centers. I've told you that the Weizmann Institute is all about basic research. We don't have engineering schools. We're not about applications. Yet, if you invest in the roots of the tree of knowledge, your findings are usually much more transformative when you translate them to application. In other words, if you're an engineering school and your research is how to take existing knowledge and transform it into technology, your impact is, or the technology you find is likely to be less transformative than the technology you find when your research is about finding new knowledge. And that is why the Weizmann Institute of Science, actually among the academic institutions of Israel, has been the most successful in translating its knowledge into patents and into money-making technology. Weizmann has established YEDA Research and Development already in 1959. That was the first technology transfer company in Israel. And since then, since 2004, more than 100 companies were established based on Weizmann technology. 130 of our alumni established startups. Just as an example, 158 patents were awarded to Weizmann scientists in 2019. And the volume of market based on Weizmann technology in 2019 was $34.5 billion US, which is rather significant. And this is a list of the top-selling blockbuster drugs that were developed at the Weizmann Institute of Science. The most famous of those is the Copaxone, which was developed to treat multiple sclerosis patients. Yeah, so we're still hopefully at the down slopes of the COVID pandemic. You know, the COVID pandemic has certainly changed our life from end to end. And in 2000, the end of 2010, the beginning of 2020, at the Weizmann Institute, like anywhere else in the world, we were exposed to the COVID's outbreak, and very soon, scientists at the Weizmann Institute of Science understood that we need to be proactive and turn their research into COVID projects. Very quickly, we had over 60 different coronavirus-related research projects on campus. Actually, these projects came not just from life science faculties and biomedical research groups, but actually all over from computer science, math, physics. As I told you, the number of research groups at the Weizmann Institute of Science is 280, and that means that, you know, almost 20% of the research group on campus have actually turned their research into COVID-related projects. We were actually able to support this research very quickly using a coronavirus response fund, to which I know many of our Canadian friends generously supported. Efforts from this research activity actually gave many fruits, some of them using AI tools in order to identify COVID outbreaks. Actually, the most interesting story, I think, among these research projects is an effort led by one of our biochemists near London, who was very quick to identify small molecules that can serve as a drug to mitigate the effect of the COVID virus. We were able to support this initial effort with almost $1 million. And today, with a recent support of £8 million by the Wellcome Trust, this initial discovery is now going into clinical trials, and hopefully very soon we'll be able to, or Near will be able to move this drug into the market. And as you know, while the population in the world is being vaccinated, that still does not guarantee that people would not get sick. So having an effective drug at our hands is of tremendous importance. Beyond COVID, of course, the Weizmann Institute has several huge research projects. I told you that at the Weizmann we believe in people. The Weizmann Institute never tries to direct our scientists in giving directions. Nevertheless, we still consolidate our efforts to support big research initiatives on campus. One huge research initiative is on brain and neural sciences. And again, there's a lot of Canadian support for this research initiative. Another research initiative is around fundamental physics research. It's called the Frontiers of the Universe, and I'll tell you a little bit about it in the remaining 5 minutes I have. And another one is around artificial intelligence and how to integrate modern and sophisticated computing tools into the research of all our scientists, from life sciences all the way to material design and physics. I'll briefly mention the Frontiers of the Universe is an initiative that is trying to generate the next revolution in physics and is looking at physics from its grandest scales, the cosmos and astrophysics, all the way to astrophysics research, all the way to particle physics research, which is looking at physics at its smallest scales. Today, research in this direction is done through very big collaborations and very ambitious projects. I'll just mention two. Weizmann Institute is heavily invested in the Large Hadron Collider in Geneva in Switzerland, looking for the basic building blocks of nature and physics. And actually, the last building block in the standard model of particle physics, the Higgs boson, was discovered through a collaboration where the Higgs convener, Elam Gross, is a professor at the Weizmann Institute of Science. The other collaboration I'll mention is the Giant Magellanian Telescope. It's a collaboration building the biggest telescope on Earth in the Atacama Desert in Chile, and the Weizmann Institute is now entering as a founder institute into this collaboration. And the last project I'll mention is a satellite called Ultrasat. Ultrasat is a space-based telescope that the Weizmann Institute is launching to space. Those of you who follow astrophysics a little bit are maybe familiar with the revolution that the Hubble telescope has driven the astrophysics field. Our ability to take telescopes and send them to space really transformed our ability to look at the cosmos. It's very unusual for a small research institution such as the Weizmann Institute to actually have its own space program. The reason we can be that ambitious is that space technology has become more compact, smaller, and therefore much cheaper. Sending satellites to space has become private enterprises. It's not just at the hands of big national science agencies such as NASA and the European Space Agency. And also Israel has become a space technology hub and center. And we're very close to all these industries, like the Israeli aerospace industry, like Elop and Elbit Systems, which are experts in building satellites. And that's why we're now leading this mission, this space mission at the Weizmann Institute of Science. I'd like to end by saying that this entire scientific endeavor would not have been possible without a very strong and committed community and family of friends and supporters all around the world. And this entire activity is led by 8 different committees around the globe. And I'd like to particularly acknowledge the activity and the support of Weizmann Canada, again led by Susan Stern, who is our great leader in Canada, Jeffrey Cohen, who is the chair of the Canadian Association, Kathy Beck, who is the chair of our international board. And I think that the impact of the Canadian Friends and Association is long, and you can see it all around campus. Support of the Beck family in environment and material research, support of the Schwartz-Weizmann family, not just in education, but also and collaborations, but also in many areas of physics, support of the Israeli family in brain research and other areas of research. So the Canadian support throughout the history of the Weizmann Institute has been tremendously helpful. And it's a good moment to say thanks for this great support. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. So first of all, thank you so much. I will just take a brief moment, because I don't see any questions in the chat yet, to let the chat kind of percolate and ask some questions, to just introduce our Weizmann Canada team and our team in Israel. So in Israel, we have Niva Karni Shamir, who's the donor relations officer. You could just wave. And Rachel Bowman, who's chief of staff. From our Weizmann Canada team, and I'm just reading because it's hard for me to see all the squares. I introduced our CEO, Susan Stern. Natalie Klepach is our development manager. Kyla Thompson, development coordinator. Chriselle Delagacos, director of stewardship. Christine Mazzaros, who is executive administrator and board liaison. We have Eloise Gilbert, who is our donor relations coordinator. Diane Bejin, who's our communications director. Katie Giffen, research officer. John Reed, communications officer. And I don't know if I've forgotten anybody. Maybe Tiffany is here, who's our research, our summer research intern. And Claire Howard, our vice president. If I missed you, please shout out. So I don't have any questions in the chat, but I encourage you, if you have a question, unmute yourself and just ask the question. And if not, I'm going to get the ball rolling in the meantime. So I know that Professor Ozeri, physics is dear and close to your heart as a physicist. Why is something like Ultrasat or the biggest telescope on Earth or anything else that we're working on under the Frontiers of the Universe flagship, why is that important to us in our day-to-day lives? I can understand like big picture, but like how is it important to me today?
That's a great question, and I think the only way we can answer a question like this is look, get a little bit of perspective from history, and ask ourselves, what are the discoveries that made the largest impact on our lives today? If we use technology all the time, what are the discoveries that science did that were able to impact our lives to the greatest extent? And I think that if you look, let's take a journey 120 or 30 years ago to Cambridge in the UK, to Thomson, who discovered the electron. And he discovered that there is an electric charge evolving around the nucleus of every atom. And he had no idea what this electron would be useful for. And in fact, at the evening of that discovery, they toasted in Cambridge to the electron, the useless particle ever found. But today we know that electricity and electronics are behind anything we do. So if you look at Erwin Schrödinger, who discovered the Schrödinger equation, discovered quantum mechanics, he had no idea what this is useful for. He tried to find the basic operating system of nature, but the transistor, the laser, none of these would have happened without Erwin Schrödinger's finding. And you couldn't think today of how our life would look like without computers. If you ask yourself, how am I impacting my life when I participate in research on a new drug for COVID? The answer is obvious. Of course, any drug against COVID would impact our life immediately, but no drug for COVID could have been done today without computers. So if you like, research that finds the new physics would not find directly the new drug. It would transform the way we look for drugs. Okay, and I think this is where the answer lies. If you look at the nations in which Isaac Newton and Leibniz were working, these are the nations where thermodynamics and Newton's laws were discovered. These are exactly the nations in which the Industrial Revolution happened. And these are the nations that are leading the world economically today as well. As I said, Weizmann Institute is about finding, investing in the roots of the tree of knowledge. These are the deepest roots of the tree of knowledge. If you invest your research there, the transformation, the revolution you're likely to drive through is probably the most meaningful and most impactful.
Great. Thank you. I'll carry on. If anybody, just unmute yourself and ask a question if anybody has one. My question, I'm going to ask things that I'm curious about now. So how did you come to decide, or how did the Institute come to decide on Institute for Brain and Neurosciences, Frontiers of the Universe, and AI as the flagship projects?
It's a good question. It's always, it's always a meeting point of need and opportunity. On the needs, you see, for example, let's take AI, for example. We know now that the world is undergoing a revolution of using machine learning and artificial intelligence tools. And these tools really transform our ability to do anything, really, from autonomous driving all the way to data management. And we need these tools. We understand that using these tools in our research, especially in light of the fact that our scientists are gathering tremendous amounts of data in contemporary research, using these tools in research is likely to have tremendous impact. but our scientists are not AI experts, and that's why we need to make sure that we give our scientists the correct hardware, the correct expertise in order to capitalize on these technologies and transform their research. In brain, we know the opportunities in the fact that we have a very strong and very diverse group of scientists that are doing brain and neuro research at the Weizmann Institute of Science. I should mention that brain research is very interdisciplinary. If you'd like to make progress in brain research, you need not just to have biologists, but also to have chemists, computer scientists, psychiatrists, physicists. Brain research is really is at the intersection of many scientific disciplines. Weizmann Institute, being small and dynamic, is very interdisciplinary, and that's the opportunity. The need comes from the fact that if you look at life sciences have gone through a tremendous revolution, which is mostly driven through genetics. If today, if 40 years ago, the only way to treat cancer was by poisoning our entire body using chemotherapy, today, by understanding the genetic mechanisms behind cancer, we can actually custom tailor biological drugs to a specific tumor, to a specific mutation. This technology really lies on the basic research understanding of genetics. If you try to find a parallel in brain and neuroscience, you find that we lack the basic understanding there. We don't have the basic building blocks and basic understanding as for how the brain works, and that's why all these neurodegenerative disease that unfortunately many of us need to face. The medical world has much less to offer for these disease. And that's why we feel that there's a need to strengthen the basic understanding in brain research. So again, it's a meeting point of need and opportunity. And in Frontiers of the Universe, it's the same. We want to understand. We know that we have a very good physics theory, quantum physics, and the standard model of particles and fields. But we know it's not the end of the story. And today, if you want to make impact in these fields, you have to join huge collaborations. These are billions of dollars operations. You need to send your science to space. These are gigantic and ambitious projects, and we would like to support those to put the Weizmann Institute at the front of this research area.
Francie, just unmute yourself.
Yes.
Great.
Yesterday was an exciting day for all of us to see when we talk about frontiers of the universe. And I guess this is where we're all heading, thinking about like really what's up there and how are we really going to find out what is really in the universe. And I know that we've talked several times about this telescope that is going to be, I guess, putting Weizmann in the forefront, Israel in the forefront, being able to see things in the universe that other telescopes have not been able to see. Can you elaborate a little bit about that? I know we're collaborating with different institutions in order to raise the funds. What will that special telescope? I know last week we attended a meeting and I heard that there were like 4,000 of, the exoplanets, around us. And I imagine that one particular telescope will help us decide which planet to really study to find out if life is really existing there as well. How much is that telescope? Who are we collaborating with? And will it put Israel and Weizmann at the forefront?
Thank you very much, Francie, for this great question. So Ultrasat is indeed, let me begin by saying that sending telescopes to space has transformed our ability to look at the universe, but it has always been a tremendously expensive, very, very cumbersome operation. It took decades to put the Hubble in space. The Hubble is not operating anymore, and the replacement of the Hubble is still not there. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to, in many ways, revolutionize that field of sending telescopes to space, do it quicker, do it cheaper, and do it more, in a creative way, for like taking technology, making it smaller, and by using creative ideas, try to make this whole operation more dynamic. And in fact, we believe that Ultrasat will be the first sparrow of Weizmann Institute space missions, and every 5 to 10 years we'll be able to send another satellite to space. The reason to send a satellite to space is to be able to make observations that you can't do on the ground, and Ultrasat is going to be special in that sense because it will look at ultraviolet radiation. Ultraviolet radiation does not penetrate through the atmosphere, so you do need to send your satellites to space in order to do that. And even more than that, Ultrasat will be designed in order to look at very fast events, at what we call transient phenomena. These transient phenomena can be cosmic explosions. When stars end their life, they explode, and these are very fast events. And transient events can also be, as you mentioned, Francie, the passing of a planet across its host stars. So the way we detect these planets, because they don't emit light, we can't see them, but we are able to detect them when they slightly eclipse the star they evolve on. Now, it's very difficult to find these transient phenomena when you look with telescopes that have a very narrow field of view, and that's why Ultrasat is going to have a very big field of view. And on these two accounts, being able to look in the ultraviolet and having a very fast response and fast communication lines to Earth and a very wide field of view, it's going to be very unique, and it's going to lead astrophysics research and put Weizmann and Israel at the absolute forefront of this research. We're actually going to be we plan to launch in 2024. After Ultrasat was announced, several other projects have tried to go the same direction, but we're going to be 3-4 years ahead of everyone else. And that's why we'll have 3-4 years of exclusive data that would come to the Weizmann Institute and to its partners. We're partnering up with NASA, which would guarantee all access to scientists at NASA to data that we gather, as well as DAISY, which is a German research institution. So our partners will also enjoy exclusive usage of this data, but certainly it's going to put Israel and Weizmann at the forefront of this scientific research. As you mentioned, now that we have such advanced technology, we're not only able to look at planets, extrasolar planets, we will also be able to look at light that goes through the atmosphere of these planets. And if you look at light that goes through the atmosphere of these planets, you're able to try and identify absorption lines through these planets. And these absorption lines would tell you what are the materials that move around this atmosphere. And if you're able to identify absorption through water molecules, that increases the likelihood of that planet to host carbon-based life as we know it. If you find methane in the atmosphere of this planet, there's also likelihood of carbon-based life and biology happening on this planet. So such markers of possible biological activity on these planets would be tremendously exciting, because, as you said, it would hint towards the possibility of these extrasolar planets hosting life, which is mind-blowing if you ask me.
Mind-blowing, yes, mind-blowing. I'm going to switch gears for our last question. One last question that just came in. Is cryptography an area of study at Weizmann?
Yes, very much so, definitely. Actually, we have some of the, if you look at our computer science activity, it's relatively broad and it's excellent across. But if there's one field of research where Weizmann has excelled continuously, it's cryptography. In fact, the 3 of our Turing Awards that went to Amir Pnueli, Adi Shamir, and Shafi Goldwasser, all of them has gone into activity in cryptography. if you encrypt data when you send it through your communication lines with your banks, for example, or any other private digital communication lines, that relies on what we call a public key cryptography, and the ability of the bank, for example, to give you a cryptographic key in a public way. And that means that even if other adversaries have that encryption key, they can't use it in order to decrypt information. That protocol is called RSA. I don't know if you heard about the RSA protocol, but the S in the RSA stands for Shamir, Adi Shamir, who is a professor at the Weizmann Institute of Science. So certainly cryptography is a very active field of research at the Weizmann Institute. Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
May I ask a question, please?
You may.
Arnold Englander is my name. I enjoyed the address very much. I'd like to ask a commercial question. You mentioned you start with basic knowledge, but it's obvious from all the patents that have been awarded to the Weizmann Institute that and the technology that has resulted there from your research, that profitable endeavors have resulted. Are you able in a short period of time to just outline the basic principles of how you divide the economic results of all the scientific endeavors that are taking place at the Weizmann Institute?
So thanks, Arlene. I can certainly do that. So you put your finger on a at face value contradiction, but if you think about it a little bit, it makes a lot of sense. While we invest in basic research, the applicative outcome of our research is probably carried out the largest financial revenues of all other institutions in Israel. And it makes sense because usually if you find, as I said, if you find a new scientific discovery, it's likely to lead to a much more meaningful and significant and deep application than if you're already using an existing knowledge. And I think we've seen that happening again and again and again. When we identify, and again, our scientists are free to follow their curiosity, so we never direct research towards an applicative end. But once our scientists identify an applicative discovery, we take this discovery, we protect it through patents. So we protect the intellectual property that emanated from Weizmann research. And then there's a path that takes this discovery, matures it, and after it's matures enough, it's being commercialized. It's being commercialized outside of the Weizmann Institute of Science. The revenues from this application, from this discovery is then distributed between the scientists and the Weizmann Institute. And if you look at the endowment fund of the Weizmann Institute that has been accumulated so far, probably half of it has accumulated on the revenues coming from intellectual property and technology transfer. So we're I think in that sense, we're very lucky.
And does that mean that every scientist who enters into research at the Weizmann has a contract with the Weizmann as to what will transpire with respect to revenues that may result from an invention leading to a patent?
Yes, of course. So it's very orderly. Usually it's about 40% that goes to the scientists, 60% goes to the Weizmann Institute. That's the usual deal. Actually, our scientists are not allowed to serve as CEOs of company or entrepreneurs of companies. And that's because we believe our scientists should dedicate their time to do research and to mentor graduate students. But yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Ozeri, to Shira as well. I see it's now 1 o'clock and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I'm going to turn it over now to Les Rothschild, who wears many hats, but today he's wearing the hat of being the co-chair of Holy Blossoms Israel Engagement Committee, and really a lot of gratitude to Les for putting together this entire series, including today's event. So Les, thank you. I'm going to turn it over to you to just wrap us up.
Great. Thanks, Rabbi, and thanks for an interesting talk, Roe. It was one thing that I don't know if you can do this in one sentence, answer my question, is what is the most famous thing that Weizmann that their research has developed into? Is there one thing that we would know of that as lay people that has affected our lives? And there's probably lots, but off the top of your head, and I'm not looking for a long answer, just give me one.
Well, I'll give you one discovery that won the Nobel Prize. It's the structure of the ribosome. Similar to the structure of DNA, the ribosome structure was deciphered at the Weizmann Institute of Science. CAR T-cell immunotherapy started at the Weizmann Institute of Science. RSA cryptography started at the Weizmann Institute of Science.
Okay. I just want to get us out. I do that because one of the reasons why we did this, we're interested in this, is because we wanted to show not only the value that the Weizmann Institute has brought, right, and has brought to the world, but also we're looking at Israel and looking to be proud of the things that Israel is doing, and that's not necessarily always in the news. And I think Weizmann is an area that that you've shown us has really been a real leader, and so for us to take a look at the science part of it and be proud of that, I think that's so important. And I want to thank you, and I want to give a shout out to Francie Klein, who's really was her and our conversation, just a random conversation, got this started. So thank you, Francie, for bringing this, and thank you to all of you. In 2 weeks' time, this is a 4-week series, and so you should have gotten all the information about it. In 2 weeks' time, we're switching to politics, Israeli politics, and we're going to have Professor Paul Lips, who is a wonderful teacher, very knowledgeable, going to be talking, bringing us up to date on the Israel politics in Israel and in the region. And I really encourage you to come and see us then. And then the following weeks, there are other things. I won't mention them now, but you can see them as you get the information from you. So again, I want to thank everybody, the Weizmann, Shira, especially for pulling it all together on this end, and Rabbi Goodman. And I'm hoping that you've learned a little bit something about a part of Israel that you might not have known about. That was the whole idea of this of today. So Shira, I'll turn it back to you to just close it off.
Thank you. There was a very loud lawnmower and leaf blower, and there was all kinds of craziness going on outside my window. Anyways, I hope it's quieter now. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Professor Ozeri, for sharing the world of Weizmann with us. It was incredibly informative, and obviously we could go on. I keep writing questions down, but I won't ask them now. I'll save it for the next time. It's really been a privilege listening to you and your presentation, and having you so eloquently answer the questions, why Weizmann and why now? Thank you, Les Rothschild and Rabbi Goodman, for hosting and bringing together this wonderful group of people. Another shout out to Francie Klein, the muse behind this all. And the biggest thank you goes to each of you for choosing to spend the last hour with us and asking questions. I am so appreciative that you made time to hear about Weizmann today. As you can probably tell, our campus in Israel is characterized by joy and pursuit of science. And these last 4 months have been a very long science lesson. One thing the world has learned is the importance of basic scientific research. We say there wouldn't be an mRNA vaccine for COVID so quickly had it not been for the 20 years into mRNA research that came before that. At Weizmann Canada, we invest in discovery, recognizing that with time, space, and resources, that scientists at Weizmann put hope in action and make a global impact. We are driven by the purpose of science to develop new knowledge to benefit humanity and improve the world. It's my pleasure and passion to talk about Weizmann. So if you're interested in finding out more about the research or how you can join us, please reach out to me. I put my email address in the chat. It's shira@weizmann.ca, and I would love to talk with anyone. I hope you'll share some of your wows from today's talk with others. You'll be helping to promote science literacy. Also, please follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more about our research and discoveries for the benefit of humanity. Thank you once again, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Thank you all.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you.
How could I listen to the recording?